you really want to get to is, what information do you need to know about you that you have never heard or that they haven't felt comfortable to tell you? Welcome to the Anika Apple Podcast. Glad to have you back with me this week. And as we jump on into it, we are going to talk today about how the path to healing for me started with my identity. The identity has such an incredibly deep part of the story of my healing journey. And there's so much to explore. So I'm so excited to get into that. I want to dive right in there. But before I do that, I want to take a moment to come from my heart to yours. One of the things that I find myself saying pretty regularly is more grace. And this piece about more grace came first as a reminder to myself that it was important for me to give myself more grace, that I deserved more grace than what I would give to myself. And as someone who would often extend grace to other people, even past the point of maybe where I felt like there should be grace given, it's like when you experience the same kind of repeated behavior over and over again, and you're like, we've talked about this, like it should be different, right? But I would still extend grace. And extending grace felt comfortable. And there's all sorts of stories and narratives behind probably why that was, some healthy and some unhealthy. But what I learned as I was really observing my own behavior is that I was not extending that same level of grace to myself. Now, I don't mean that I should give myself grace if I keep making the same mistake 15, times. There should be a point where I recognize, okay, it's time for me to learn from this, make a new decision. But in the times where I felt like I should know better, I felt frustrated about my choices, I felt like there could have been another way, and I just didn't take the time to do it, or whatever the Monday morning quarterbacking was that I might do on my own journey that I would not do for someone else. And I want to remind you in this moment that you deserve more grace, likely more grace than you're giving yourself. And even the situation that you might be beating yourself up about, I would just tell you, the lessons are worth it. This moment to recognize, oh, I do need to give myself more grace is worth it. Because sometimes we need the contrast between things to recognize that there's something here for us, a choice that we can do things differently. And so when we allow ourselves to see ourselves in these moments, it's also transforming us. It's not just about that experience and giving yourself grace, but it's also shifting the way you think about you deserving grace. So in essence, you're fixing or you're addressing what's happening right now in the moment, and you're also changing a paradigm, changing a mindset, changing a behavior towards yourself that, when you're choosing more grace, will work in your benefit. Why should we have more grace? Because we should. Because today you have the information that you hold today. And when you're making the decision that you believe that's best today, it's valid. Tomorrow, you might have more information. You might know things that you did not know before. You might see things from a different perspective. So it will never be even with this very moment again. So whenever we go back and we're judging things from the past, or we're making assumptions, or all of these behaviors that lead us to not giving ourselves grace, they're happening in an instant where we have more information than we did then. I think as a parent, I find that a lot of times we're really, really hard on ourselves, and sometimes hard on the kids too. But I think that the truth is that we get to recognize that we don't have to be so hard on ourselves because we've never done this before, right? At whatever age our kids are, whatever experience they're at, it's like, this is the first time you're going through it. It's the first time with that particular kid at that age, with that situation, with you knowing what you know now, not knowing what you don't know. It's the first time. And even if you have kids that are older who have had similar experiences, they're still not the same. They're not the same kid, and you are not the same. My point to you is there's not such a thing as an identical situation. And so because there isn't, it means that you're always doing some part of this for the first time. So allow yourself to have more grace. Remind yourself that you deserve grace, the same kind of grace that you would want to give to others, that you would grant to a child who's learning and growing. You deserve that because you are someone's child and you're still learning and growing. And that is from my heart to yours. So today's key core topic on the podcast is all about how my identity was a part of my path to healing. I want to talk for a minute about what identity is and where it comes from. A lot of times we think about identity and we go right to our titles. What are the roles? How do we define ourselves? And those are indeed a part of our identity. We can identify with these different titles, but they're not the identity in its entirety. Our identity is deeper than that. Our identity is about who we were designed and created to be. Some parts of which we are known to us today, and we are still exploring others. We won't have a full understanding of all of our identity until, I don't know, maybe our last days. Maybe we never fully understand it in our humanness. But there's an evolution of getting to know more and more about your identity. I have found that learning about my identity came through my relationship with God, understanding more about who I am in God. And then the other parts of it were revealed to me as I got to know myself. One of the biggest things standing in the way of my identity was my relationship to the titles and how I saw myself in the world. Some of those titles were attached to a belief system that because there was a specific title, it meant something about who I was. What I learned about identity is the piece that's underneath what those titles are. So the titles don't actually define me. They're ways I can describe who I actually am. Sometimes they're aligned and sometimes they're not. But the identity is who I actually am, regardless of the titles. So the identity exists even when there is no title to substantiate that I am whatever it is that I am saying that I am. One of the big things that God said to me was about my role in healing for the world. And I was like, I'm not a doctor, a nurse. I'm not, I don't sit in any of these roles that are healing roles. So how would I play a role in healing? And I had to let go of this mindset that someone who was here to support healing looked or moved or acted in a certain way, or that they had a particular job or a particular set of credentials. My identity is that I am a healer. It is part of the identity that God has given me. The credentials and experiences and learnings and all of those things are part of how I substantiate that in this lifetime. How do I determine it? What do I do with it? How do I bring practices and processes to life in a way that is meaningful and helpful? Those are choices and decisions that go in alignment with my identity. If I never did any of those things, it would still be a part of my identity. Whether or not it seemed valid to myself or to others is a whole nother story. So why is understanding your identity part of your path to healing? Because to truly know yourself is healing. Let me put it to you this way. Imagine for a moment that there are parts of who you are that simply don't make sense to you today. You can't understand why you have a certain feeling about something, why you have a leaning or an interest in something in particular, and it seems to go against the other parts of who you are. Imagine that there's some kind of conflict between this part of who you are and the way you operate in the world today. A lot of times we experience that disconnect because there is something missing, a part of us that we don't quite fully understand yet. One example that I will give to you, and I talked about in my heart to yours, I talked about more grace. I can go down the road of forgiveness as an example. One of the things I know about myself is I forgave really easily and often, and could not hold on to anger very much for most instances. That my anger burned very quickly, and then it would be done, and really, I wouldn't have called it this, but I was seeing that person again in their divinity, like in the who they have the potential to be. And so holding on to that discomfort or anger or upset was really, really difficult for me. And I often wondered why. Like, why would you make me this way that I can't hold on to it? Like, sometimes I wanted to be fired up and mad about something that happened, especially if it was some kind of injustice. But it would be really difficult for me to stay in that space. And now that I understand more about who I am, it makes so much sense. It's so clear why. How can you be someone who part of your role is to help people understand and experience more love in the world. And love is grace, it is forgiveness, and then be harboring bad feelings about things that happen. And so God gave me the capacity to navigate through things in a way that releasing it and moving in forgiveness feels a lot more natural to me. It is the way that I am. Sometimes we have these parts about who we are that don't quite make sense to us, and therefore there's a conflict with the identity. The more that we understand who we are, the more that we get curious about what is connected to it. What's underneath this new information about our identity that is aligned with who we are? It's like making a connection when you put the plug together, and it's like, and now everything is working, right? It's like the plug goes into the extension cord's in the outlet on the wall, and now everything has full power. It's a great feeling, like it's all connected and it's working. It makes sense now. And then, of course, the other is possible where we could not have plugs that fit together. One is, they're both the receiving ends, right? And so that's not going to work. So we need to have this way that we can make sense of the truth of who we are. When we understand the identity that God has given us, there are things about us that are revealed that help us put two and two together across all different areas of our lives. And the reason that leads to healing is because once we can understand that there's something here that we were meaning to explore or to become more clear about, it becomes easier for us to then accept this part of ourselves. We often sit in places where we are not fully healed because we don't understand who we are. I'm not saying to you or suggesting that once I understood my identity that everything cleared up, because that's not what happened. But what did happen is that I started on a journey of asking myself, so if this is so, then what does this mean about the way that I'm operating today? What does this mean about the shifts that I'm considering making? What does this mean about the relationship that I have to the world, to my experience of the world? Understanding my identity helped me on my path to healing because now I began to make connections where there were none before. And I also became more curious about exploring what could be. When you are ready to do your healing work, you begin to find that everything is curious. Why do I do that? What is it about this that makes me drawn to it? What are some of the reasons that I would have an interest in this? Your identity holds so many of the answers for these questions. And when you have parts of yourself that you are denying, pushing away, minimizing, quieting, you are creating that disconnect, the misalignment in yourself. In order to be on your journey of healing, you have to be in a place of acceptance. And I would submit to you that the acceptance of yourself grows over time. That the more you get to know who you are, the more you accept you, the more that you relish being who you've been created to be. And the more confident that you become in this version of yourself that you see healing, the stronger and more connected you feel to your identity. The clearer you are with your identity, the more and more you can begin to let go of things that don't serve you, and that creates space for your healing. So if I were in your shoes in this moment and you were saying, so how do I do this? I would tell you that there's a couple of things. First and foremost, who are you? What is your identity? And you can start with describing how you see yourself, what you would identify as your identity. You can even capture, capture a couple of places around the titles and the things that you go by. You can capture all of that. But then I would tell you to walk away from it, spend some time doing something else, come back to it and read it as if you are reading it out to someone. This is who I am. Look for the resonance in what you say. Does it really sit with you? What parts about it feel like they are just simply on the surface? What parts of it feel like, is that really who I am, or is this who I'm being? What parts of this feel like It used to serve me, but it doesn't anymore. And then I would begin to go through that list and refine it. The next thing I would encourage you to do is have some time in meditation or in prayer where you go in with intention around exploring your identity. In prayer, I always say to God, show me me. And some of that is where I've gleaned more and more about my identity, but a lot of what God did was show me stuff I didn't want to see about myself. The behaviors, the thought processes, my questioning, my fears, a lot of the rebellion of what God desired for me. I would see those things. And I made a decision that as I started to ask God to show me me, that I would be willing to see what God showed me. Having that kind of intention in the beginning was really helpful because even when things came that I did not want to see or I didn't want to accept, I remember that I asked for it. And that God was just simply giving me what I asked. And that I had made the decision that if I knew something, I could make decisions about it. Whether it was I want to be more of this or I want to change that because I don't particularly like that aspect of who I'm being. So I could make those shifts myself. So when you open yourself up for the divine, for God, your higher self, however it is that it flows to you, to show you parts of yourself, to reveal some of your identity to you, be open to it. And so capture the things that you see, the visions that you might have, the words that come forward, the feelings. Capture those on the path to your identity. The third thing you might do, or pick some people who are really honest, that you know will tell you the truth, and say to them, I'm doing some exploration around the truth of who I am. What information do you have about me that I need to know that you have never shared with me, that you've never told me? Because you don't need the things that they say to you all the time because you remember those, you know those things. What you really want to get to is what information do you need to know about you that you have never heard or that they haven't felt comfortable to tell you? Whatever those things are that you receive, take them as a gift as well. Have gratitude that they would share something with you. And then take that back to prayer and meditation. Sit with it. Allow the things to start to form. Allow things that are not fitting to fall away. Allow things that are repetitive to really have some weight in your mind. And remember that your identity is something that evolves. So there's the core of who you are, what I would say, what God placed on the inside of you and said, this is what you're here to do. But then there's also the things that you can explore and that grow as you grow. And so at any time, you can decide the things that are no longer serving you and you can change them. And if it's at the core of your identity, then, you might have to have some conversations with God. I'm just saying, but you can change it. But allow the truth to reveal itself to you. One of the things that I think is really powerful, whether it is through prayer, through meditation, is asking for the information to come. And what I mean by that is setting the intention that today I want to feel more confident about being able to articulate my identity. And then you go into your prayer, your meditation, your stillness, and you expect that it is forming. And when you get ready to journal, you allow what is flowing through you to just come. You allow it to come without judgment. Doing that exercise regularly will help you have more insight into the things that continuously come up. Another way that you can tap deeper into your identity is by having a conduit, a third party. In my set of offerings, one of the things that I have is called Soul to Crown, Crown to Soul, intuitive guidance. And in those sessions, I sit with my clients and allow the divine to speak through me. It's an opportunity to help people get clearer about their path to purpose, to understand who they are, to help them connect more deeply to their intuitiveness. So we talk about what is coming up that are blocks in the way of them seeing themselves. And I find that in my own exploration and that I have helped others through, that this clarity about knowing their identity starts to immediately shift things that are ready to be healed. There's a comfort level with releasing things that they know have been ill-fitting, and that they also find themselves identifying things that they have been wanting to walk away from and weren't sure why. That's healing. It is healing for you to release something that you've been wanting to let go of, but you haven't been able to, and you're not quite sure why you're holding on to it. So much of what we navigate are stories and narratives that are not our own, that we did not author. Some of it comes through our DNA, some of it is what we've been socialized with, and some of it are stories that people even close to us have told us about ourselves that we accepted. Being able to release any of those things puts us on a path to healing. You want to heal? Get clearer about your identity. Understand who it is that you are and begin to accept what you find. The last tip that I would give you, and I think this is so very important, there are a lot of times we create these visions of who we think we're supposed to be in the world, and then anything that is not that, it's like, that can't possibly be, it's not going to be enough, it's not going to be good enough, it's not going to be what I expected to experience in this lifetime. And I would suggest to you that when you allow yourself to sit in the fullness of who you were created to be, it doesn't even matter if it matches what you thought you were supposed to be. There's something about getting connected back to your truth that feels so real. It feels so right. It's like whatever else you were holding on to, it's like, I don't even need that anymore. And I'll tell you that, being in certain roles in my career were a part of that for me. It's like, I need to be in this level and it needs to be like looking like this, and, being a wife, and like all of these different things that were really important parts of my identity. And I will tell you that what I identify myself as now is so simple in comparison to all of the titles. There's nothing for me to have to keep up. It just is that I am who I am. And in my acceptance of who God has created me to be, it feels so right and so fitting that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. And that is healing. Giving yourself the grace, the acceptance, the non-judgment to be who it is that you are truly called to be. Last thing I'll say to you is and you may have heard me say this before, but we don't understand the assignments of everyone around us. So as leaders, I would say that sometimes you might find that you have somebody on your team or in your organization where there's a lot of friction, and it might be frustrating to you. And I get it. And sometimes that assignment is to bring something out of you that otherwise you would not be able to tap into. That doesn't mean that the situation that you're dealing with doesn't need to be addressed. Of course it does. But when you sit the situation to the side and you ask yourself, what's the lesson here? Oftentimes, you can see the other person really clearly, but what you're really getting is some insight into who you are being and what could be different and what you desire it to be. And that's really telling. Having the opportunity to understand all of the assignments of everyone around us is something that I don't think that we get to in this lifetime. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe that we will understand all of the assignments. But what we can do is hold the truth that people are here for a reason. And that there's things that through their behavior, through their actions, their choices, their interactions with us, there are things that we are learning about ourselves. There's opportunities for us to grow, to make new decisions, to gain our boldness, to reconnect with our voices. There are opportunities for us to see and desire to change things that we then go off and create new things to counter whatever that experience might have been. So innovation can be born from it. Voices can emerge through it. Changes to policy and procedure and processes, systems can change from it. So just because we may not understand all of their assignments, it doesn't mean that it's not valid and it's not working on us in such a way that it's getting us to become who it is that we are meant to be in this lifetime. So if you know that you don't understand everyone's assignment, you can make the decision that as there are things that are happening, that indeed those things are happening for you. You might not like all of what is happening in the environment around you, wherever you live in the world. You might not be happy with the social conditions, the political conditions, whatever the dynamics might be for your specific region. But it doesn't mean that whatever it is that's happening is not serving some kind of purpose. Perhaps the environment is exactly what you need to become who you were supposed to be. Perhaps that environment is one where you will test and learn what it is to be that higher version of yourself. God reminded me the other day that we need to have darkness in order to really see and appreciate light. The contrast is what helps us understand it best. If all we had was sunlight 24/7, we would likely begin to take that sunlight for granted. But having the contrast helps us to look forward to sun when it comes out the next day. In the same way, the environment and experiences that you are having right now are creating a place for you to see yourself and to ask yourself questions about who you're being and who you desire to be. What is your identity? What's your assignment? What is it that you're here to do and to create? And when you can answer that question, you will be deeply on your path to purpose. And more importantly, you will be actively healing. So I hope that that really resonates with you and that you will take a few moments today to journal. What do you know about your identity? I hope you'll choose to ask some people in your circle to get some reflections. I hope you'll spend some time in prayer or meditation, truly seeking with an openness to understand more about who you are. And of course, when you're ready, there are plenty of people who are really gifted at helping people on their path to purpose like I am. And certainly we're here for you. The offering that I mentioned is called Soul to Crown, Crown to Soul, and it is noted in the show notes here for the podcast. I will close with a thought instead of our typical Ask Anika Anything. And I want to say this to you. Peace is not something that is fleeting. True peace lives on the inside of you. And it is always yours to choose. So no matter what may be going on in the world around you, what kind of experiences that you might be going through, peace is always available to you as a choice. And the beautiful thing about peace is it doesn't have to be the only thing that you choose. You can choose peace and still make a decision that you've got to move out of the situation or circumstances that you're experiencing. You can choose peace and still give love fully, even knowing that that love may not be returned. You can choose peace and make a decision that the experiences of what is happening around you require some kind of transformation. Peace can exist with all of the different things that are present in your life. Peace is a choice to reside on the inside of you. Your actions can be related to the decisions that you're making about what's next. To have peace within yourself, I always think about when God says peace that is beyond understanding. It goes past the limits of our understanding in our humanness, surpasses all understanding, meaning that even as much as you can fathom, the peace is just greater than that. So in the midst of struggle, challenge, what God gives me as peace helps me to just stay centered. So I think about the vision that I hold for myself often is like there's a storm happening all around me, like the cloud of a tornado, and it's swirling and swirling and swirling, and I'm sitting right in the eye of the storm. I'm sitting in the eye of the storm, and I know that I am safe there, and I can still have peace even though the storm is all around me. That's what God offers to us as peace. Surpasses all understanding. And peace is always available to you as a choice, meaning if you're not choosing peace, you're choosing something. Explore what that something is and why, and you will have answers to the questions about why your environment is the way it is. There is nothing that God gives us that anyone else can take away. Nothing. What God gives us is eternal. Sometimes we choose to focus on the things that we can touch that are physical and tangible here, instead of holding on to the things that are external. The love that we get from God, the peace that God extends to us, they don't end. And you can always choose it again. You can always just make another choice to choose peace. I hope that you will choose peace today because you deserve to have peace on the inside of you, regardless as to what dynamics you might be experiencing around you. And as always, I wish you peace and blessings.